this is Bill Frank, and I am reporting from the Center for Research and Economic Research and Forecasting. My special guest is Bill Watkins. Bill, you gave a very informative speech to a crowd, a packed room, and I wanted to drill down, if I can, on some of the things that you presented, because it was a real mixed bag that you had up there. First of all, the United States and California seem to be coming out of a recession, but one of the major findings that I took away is that Ventura County lags behind the state, lags behind the United States. And this late in the recovery, that might be concerning to some. Do you have any concerns about the lateness of our recovery?
Well, first I would say that in general, the more local you get, the worse the forecast is right now. The United States is better than California. California, in a sense, is better than Ventura County. But then it's questionable. You know, Ventura County, as have many communities on the coast, elected to put in place things that would cause growth to grow slower. For instance, SOAR. Exactly. And so those are things you choose, and you get it. And presumably, you know, I know that if you try to put a steel mill here, they're not going to do it, right?
Correct.
So people have chosen to value quality of life, and that's their choice to make. My only worry is that we take care of the people, young people, especially lower socioeconomic groups, so that they can have the skills to go someplace else and have a career, because we're not providing opportunity here.
Well, I want to come back and talk about demographics, but I want to stay on this subject if we can for just a minute. You mentioned SOAR. SOAR is coming up for review. It's been 10 years, hard to believe, but it's coming up for review. The good thing that you pointed out about SOAR is that it lessened the decline when the economy was skidding.
That's right.
However, it's holding us back as the economy is recovering.
Okay, first, attributing everything to SOAR may be going a little too far. We did some research into SOAR, and we had a hard time finding any effect from it. And one of the things we took away was that maybe getting through a planning department is harder than it is to get election won. And so we're not sure that SOAR is having a lot of effect at all. It's difficult to develop even in places that don't, that say they want to grow, right? You've got a lot of uncertainty, occasionally years, and so it's not clear that SOAR is actually holding us back by itself. Given that, then so you extend it. The other thing is that it didn't affect house or land values. It should have expected, cause agricultural land values to decline. We couldn't find any effect, and so it also might have been because it does sunset, and people think that actually is a problem. They'll redraw the boundaries or something like that. I don't know, but right now, and the other pressures are such that I'm not sure that in the next 10 years or 20 years, whatever, it's going to make a lot of difference either. So,
all right.
Well,
sure. Bill, let's continue down that path then, because you mentioned regulation of getting a house approved and so forth. Regulation was number 2 on the constraints of the constraints to our local economy and to our state economy as well. Talk to us then, if you will, about regulation. What regulations are constricting our growth? How would we get around them? How would we do away with them?
Again, I'm going to start at the top. Sarbanes-Oxley passed during the Bush administration after Enron. And I point out, everybody they did was against the law already. Everybody at Enron either died or went to jail, right?
Correct.
And so in some sense you go, why do you create the new law? But they did. That's got to be repealed. Dodd Frank's got to be repealed. What that's going to do to the financial sector and the rest of the economy is huge. Even the economists have come out for it. And like I said, they're not known as small government, a group of guys in a magazine. So those two at a national level. At California's level, AB 32 is the California's carbon regulation. And what we did was we set our standards so high that it's much cheaper for businesses to operate elsewhere. And they will, and especially on a product that's distributed worldwide, competing worldwide. You can't afford to pay an extra cost in living in California. And there actually could be a perverse effect on carbon because, so they don't locate in California, which with reasonable carbon emission controls would be okay, but they go to some place that doesn't have any rules, and they start dumping Lord knows what sort of filth into the air, right? Or the rivers or whatever it is. So there's some concern about that. But what it's done is made California uniquely non-competitive in the United States. And it's, people, governors in Texas, Idaho, Utah, they all love it, Arizona.
And we're seeing net outflows of businesses and population to those surrounding states.
We're seeing documentable outflows of people. There's some dispute over businesses, and particularly California Public Policy Institute put out a report maybe 2 years ago, says, they're not going out like you see. What I think we're seeing is that we're not seeing as many new businesses created here, or businesses aren't expanding here. And an excellent example would be Amgen. Amgen, up until about 2000, was a Ventura County company. And then they expanded first to Colorado, and then Puerto Rico, right? Mm-hmm. And so they've done their growth outside the area. And my guess is that there are an awful lot of companies that would have created jobs here locally if they could have, but in order to remain competitive, have put their facilities someplace else.
All right. Bill, I want to return to demographics because that was another big point of your speech today, and talk about two things. First of all, the demographics of Ventura County. We're aging as a population. We're starting to see from some of the statistics that your partner Dan presented, more and more people living in the same house, whether that's multi-generational or what have you. And this leads into one of your big concerns, and that is providing opportunity for our young people. No new jobs, or few new jobs, are being formed here in Ventura County. What does that mean in terms of the demographics? What does that mean in terms of the economy for Ventura?
Well, what it means is our young people leave. So we create far more college graduates, say, than we create jobs for college graduates. Those people leave. And then you end up with, Santa Barbara is maybe, 10 years, 20 years ahead of us, but you end up with a community with poor people and rich people, and no obvious path in between. And that's one problem. But the other thing is that people who retire to an area, or they don't invest in it. Who invests in communities? It's young people that have families that are going to soccer and stuff like that on Sundays. And so I think you lose a little bit. Young people invest, old people consume. And that makes a completely different outcome. And coastal California is generally becoming a consumption place and not a production place.
Well, let's talk about the bifurcation, if you will, between the rich and the poor, because that's a little bit disturbing. What impact would that have on crime? What impact will that have on social services and general public services provided by our city governments?
Okay, first you increase the demand. So whether you plan for high density housing or you have 5 families living in a single family, you still got all the cars. You still have the parking. You still have the water demand and electricity demand. And so it's not like these things went away if the population just keeps growing. So those are there. Social services, the demands will go up with that. And crime, you see in Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara's crime rate's been climbing. And Santa Barbara County. And part of it is this 2 classes and the fact that the schools then become a little bifurcated too. You got rich kids going one place, poor kids going another place. Santa Barbara, because of its university, happens to have an awful lot of more good teachers than you would expect. But still, it's a challenge for them. Ultimately, it's a challenge that coastal California is going to have to figure out how to deal with.
And that leads us to education. We have 2 fine universities here in Ventura County. We have community colleges, which in Ventura County are struggling. However, there are opportunities for education.
That's
Yet, we have high unemployment. You would think we're churning out all of these college graduates, that we would have low unemployment because businesses are looking for college graduates. Where's the disconnect?
Well, the jobs we're creating happen to be for people who don't have college degrees, and our young people leave, and then we have, particularly from minorities, high dropout rates, and these people hang around, and they do what they do, and so you give somebody a college degree though, and they can go to Texas and find a fine career, and that's what you see. Ambitious young people who are well trained leave, and the ones left, are hanging around.
And those at the bottom of the spectrum then that don't have the high school education,
it's got to build a lot of frustration because they don't see a career path here. There's just no way out. If they can find a way to get educated, that's fine. But if they happen to drop out of high school, in today's world, that's the kiss of death.
Okay. During your talk, you talked of a number of industries. A couple that you didn't mention that I'd like to get your thoughts on, and one of them is healthcare. Ventura County, particularly the city of Ventura, has 2 major hospitals.
Right.
We have St. John's in Oxnard, Los Robles in Thousand Oaks, just to name a few. What is the prognosis for healthcare in the years ahead?
Changing. And over the recession, one striking thing was that healthcare continued to add jobs. It was the only sector outside of government that continued to add jobs. government's fallen off, and recently healthcare has fallen off. And right now, with the uncertainty over Obamacare, how we're going to deal with it, and all that, I think you have to say, first, it's very, very uncertain, and second, the recent declines in the jobs in that sector are disturbing, especially if you have an aging population.
Well, I was going to ask you about the Affordable Health Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. It's currently in front of the Supreme Court. They'll render a decision sometime in June or July timeframe. Talk to me about the impact on our healthcare industries if Obamacare is repealed or if Obamacare is intact.
I actually don't think much, because the fundamental problem, it doesn't matter which one, because nobody is addressing the fundamental problem. And that is, there's a huge separation between consuming medical services and paying for it. It's not like when you go to gas stations and write a check. You're buying insurance, or the government's providing it, whatever you're doing. It's just too separated. And as long as you have that buying, that consumption and purchase separated by so much, you're going to have perpetual problems, because you don't have market forces working in your own same way. So if we keep it, my guess is it will increase regulation, and businesses look at it as costly, that sort of thing. If you get rid of it, we still got the problem is nobody's talking about making you sort of tie that purchase with the consumption.
All right. Another area that you did touch on, but I'd like to go into a little bit more depth, agriculture, big part of our Ventura economy here.
Right.
What do you foresee in agriculture over the next 2 years?
Well, one thing I should note is that very recently, the company that makes methyl bromide has just withdrawn and the strawberry growers are under mandate to switch from methyl iodide to something, and methyl bromide was the something, and now that option's gone away.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're going to see is agriculture has been a long-term trend in Ventura County from land-intensive, didn't use much labor, so lima beans, a couple guys with tractors and stuff, you don't need a lot, to progressively more capital and labor-intensive crops. And right now, strawberries and other berries, and we're starting to see structures, and I think it just becomes more and more capital-intensive as we go along. So people who want to preserve farmland look around and think they're preserving something that, green and beautiful, maybe looking at a bunch of glass down and in Carpinteria, the people there have objected. They don't like looking at that, and so the flower industry is actually migrating out of there under some pressure.
I did not know that.
Slowly migrating out.
Interesting point. All right, Bill, banking. The pundits say that no economic recovery can happen without the banking industry.
That's right.
What's going to happen to banking in Ventura County?
Obviously, we've seen a consolidation that reflects a national trend.
Yes.
The number of banks is declining. Last year, there was not a new bank chartered in the United States. That's the first time forever. And I actually worry about it. I think that community-owned banks are a plus. They can't do some things that big banks can do. Big banks have higher loan limits. They deal with larger customers. They can do international transactions, stuff like that. Small banks do serve an economic purpose. And I don't think big banks can learn how to do it, or even if they could, the regulators won't let them. And so I think that's a net loss to communities as the banking sector consolidates and there are fewer and fewer community banks.
And yet, as these large banks exist in our county, such as Bank of America, just to name one, Wells Fargo to name
Sure.
another, Dodd Frank is looming over our heads. If Dodd Frank is not repealed, what sort of implications does that have for the banking industry?
Dodd Frank makes it that much harder for small banks to compete. So if you think of dealing with a regulatory compliance problem, a small bank with a few $100 million in assets has a much harder time affording another compliance officer than does Bank of America, and so because they have economies of scale there, and so I think that it just makes it that much harder for community banks to compete. Already, because of Dodd Frank, I know of one bank, does not happen to be here, but it's a community bank, that has elected is just going to get out of consumer lending. They're not going to do consumer lending.
Which, of course, defeats the whole purpose of Dodd Frank.
Sort of does, yeah.
Yes, it does. All right. Last industry I'd like to take a look at is advertising. You said the retail sales are on the rebound. We're starting to see a little bit of a pickup there, which means sales tax income is there, which is wonderful. But what's going to happen to the advertising industry over the next 2 years?
The advertising industry. Well, it seems everybody that lost their job in the recession became marketing consultants, right? It's changing so much. It's going online. Everything's going to be online. The fact that Google can track what you're doing, Facebook can track what you're doing. They know what you like to do. So in my case, they'll put up an ad for a fly fishing store or something, and say, Bill, you like it. And the cost per potential customer goes real down just a bunch, as opposed to, say, in advertising where, I don't know what percentage of the population is interested in fly fishing. It's not very much. But if they can give me fly fishing and somebody else is interested in polo and they're giving them advertisers for polo events, they can cut that cost per unit down a lot.
Follow-on question, online payment systems such as PayPal, Google's Wallet, etc. Are we going to see that become the norm, and is that going to damage both banking and the credit card industry?
At least for me, I don't know about the second half of that, the credit card, because I use either a debit card or a credit card to do my own personal purchases, and I don't go through PayPal. But no doubt that the pressure is on the brick and mortar retailers. They're just facing incredible pressure as the internet people learn how to do it well. When they first started internet sales, I thought, well, they'll never get rid of a knowledgeable salesperson right there. But they have. And so I had to purchase some skis for my wife Christmas before last, and I don't know nothing about it, and she won't tell me her weight or anything like that. So I go buy these skis, but I'm looking at a website, and all of a sudden a nice face pops up. It could have been some ugly person in the background, but he got a pretty face, and they offer to help you, right? And it's not that far away. They're going to be a voice telling you, look, Bill, you having trouble picking out, can we help you? So and that with plus reviews, I think they've gotten a long way in dealing with some of the initial objections to online.
Then does it surprise you that we're seeing retail sales tick up in the county?
You bet. In general, it's a surprise. Ventura County is a little different. Camarillo's Outlet Mall is just a powerhouse, and it's done well throughout the recession. We expect to see it to do well, but the fact that brick and mortar retail sales have picked up is a bit surprising. You bet.
Number one on your list of things to help improve the economy, the fastest, the quickest way to do that was immigration and legalized immigration. Expand on that, if you will, please.
Okay, that's not politically popular, I know. But the thing about increasing legal immigrants, it solves the fundamental problem of our economy. Our wealth is down because the value of everybody's real estate went down. If you bring in enough of these people, they need homes, it will increase the demand for it. Also note that immigrants take risk more than they're much less risk averse than people who are born here. They start businesses faster. They're not a random draw from the population. You think about somebody leaving the ancestral homeland, going across oceans to this strange country. You may not even speak the same language. That takes a little bit of guts or gumption, as my grandmother would have said, right? And so these are people with a lot to gain. And their net benefit. In the end, it turns out that the asset that constrains economies and constrains civilization is people. They're the best asset we got.
My guest has been Bill Watkins. Bill, thank you. It has been a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you.